In the last video, you learned how to add real numbers. In this video, you will learn how to subtract real numbers. And I will prove to you that subtracting is really the same thing as addition. So here I'm going to prove to you that that is true. So let's say that we wanted to subtract something by 3. I'm going to prove to you that that is the same thing as adding a negative 3. So let's say we had 5 minus 3, which would equal 2. Now, if we were to change this minus 3 into adding a negative 3, we would have 5 plus negative 3. And it would equal 2 because the signs are different, positive and negative. So I subtract 5 minus 3 to get 2, and then I keep the sign of the bigger number, and 5 is bigger than 3, so I keep the positive sign that's with the 5. So my answer would be a positive 2. Alright, if you're not convinced, let's try another one. 6 minus 3. 6 minus 3 would equal 3, and if I wanted to, I could write that as 6 plus a negative 3. And as we stated before, for the same reasons, 6 plus negative 3 would equal a positive 3. Alright, we can continue on. 7 minus 3 would equal 4. 7 plus negative 3 would also equal 4. 8 minus 3 is 5. 8 plus negative 3 is also equal to 5. So notice that subtracting 3 has the same effect as adding the opposite of 3. So subtraction is really the same thing as addition. We're just adding the opposite of a particular number. So all the rules that we learned for addition would also apply for subtraction. And so if we wanted to, we can replace any difference with a sum. So any subtraction we can replace with addition if we wanted. So here, 14 minus 4 minus 12 plus 2. If we wanted to, we can replace the minus 4 with a plus negative 4, and the minus 12 with a plus negative 12. So from here I can simplify. 12 plus negative 4, we would subtract 12 minus 4 to get 8, then keep the sign of the bigger number. 12 was bigger, that's positive, so that would be a positive 8. Then 8 plus negative 12. Here, positive 8, negative 12, so we have different signs. And with different signs, we subtract the 12 minus 8 to get 4, then keep the sign of the bigger number. 12 is bigger and it's negative, so this would be a negative 4. And then negative 4 plus 2, same thing, the signs are different, so I subtract 4 minus 2 to get 2, and then I keep the sign of the bigger number. 4 is bigger than 2, so my answer would be a negative 2. So here are some examples where we can practice with what we just learned. Here is 4 minus 12. So we have a positive 4 and a negative 12. I can think of this, if I wanted to, as 4 plus negative 12. Either way, I'm subtracting the 12 minus 4, the bigger from the smaller, or by the smaller. So 12 minus 4 would give me 8. And then I keep the sign of the bigger number. 12 is bigger than 4. 12 is negative, so my answer would be a negative 8. Next we have negative 4 minus 12. If we wanted to, we can think of this as negative 4 plus negative 12. So we see here that the signs are the same, both negative. So I add 4 and 12 to get 16, and then I keep the sign, which is negative, so my answer would be a negative 16. This next one is where people get tripped up sometimes, because we have minus a negative 12. So like we stated before, we can think of subtraction as adding the opposite. So instead of subtracting a negative 12, I can think of this as adding the opposite of negative 12, which would be a positive 12. So what this is really negative 4 plus 12. And the way to remember that is the two negatives right next to each other would make a positive. So the two negatives make a plus sign. And then from here, negative 4 plus 12, the signs are different. We have a negative 4, positive 12. So when I add them together, I subtract 12 minus 4 to get 8, and then keep the sign of the bigger number. 12 is bigger than 4, and 12 is positive, so my answer would be a positive 8. Here now we have subtraction with variables, and we also have subtraction with parentheses. So we're incorporating two new things here. Now with subtraction and the parentheses, this minus sign means we're subtracting everything in parentheses. So not only are we subtracting the x, but we're subtracting the 4. So what we have is actually x minus x, and then minus the 4 as well. All right, so be careful. You're subtracting everything in the parentheses. So the common mistake is people forget about the 4 and make it positive when it should be a minus 4 as well. Now here, x minus x would give me 0. Anything minus itself would be 0. So we have 0 minus 4, which would simply be negative 4. Here are some more examples with the parentheses. We have a negative in front of an x and then minus 5. So this minus sign, this negative sign, goes to both the x and the negative 5. So this would become a negative x and then a negative 5. The two negatives make a plus, so a positive 5. So my answer would be negative x plus 5. Next example, we have negative, and then parentheses, negative y plus 4 minus h. So this negative goes to everything in the parentheses. So basically we're just changing the sign of everything inside the parentheses. So a negative y would be a plus y, a negative and a positive 4, negative and positive would make a negative 4, and then minus a negative h, that would become a positive h. The two negatives make a positive. So my simplified form would be y minus 4 plus h. And a way we can think of this as well, if we wanted to, is we can think of this as there being a 1 in the front. If there's nothing written, it's an assumed 1, because 1 times anything doesn't change the value. So we can think of this as distributing a negative 1. So negative 1 times negative y, negative 1 times 4, and negative 1 times negative h. Next example, we have b minus parentheses y minus 4. So once again, this minus goes to everything in parentheses. So we have a minus y and a minus 4. Minus the negative would be a positive. So that's a positive 4. So what we have is b minus y plus 4. Now as we finish up, do take note that subtraction is neither commutative nor is it associative, meaning it does matter the order in which I place the numbers when I subtract. So 7 minus 3 would be 4, and it's not the same thing as if I were to change the numbers 7 and 3 around. So if I put the 3 first and the 7 second, 3 minus 7 is negative 4, which is not the same as 7 minus 3. Whereas addition, it is commutative because 7 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 7. So here I can change the order of the numbers and get the same thing, whereas subtraction I cannot. And as we stated, subtraction is not associative either, meaning it does matter how I group together the different numbers I'm subtracting. So if I were to subtract 7 minus 4 minus 3, looking at the grouping, if I group together 7 minus 4 and do that first, that would be 3 minus 3, which would equal 0. But here, if I group together the 4 and the 3 instead of the 7 and 4, we now have 7 minus 4 minus 3. And we would have 7 minus, and then parentheses here would be 1. So 7 minus 1 would equal 6. So notice the grouping does make a difference. Here we have 0, here we have 6. So subtraction is neither commutative nor is it associative.